it's hopeless when you think that you lost. Oh, I will take your hand and we'll rise up from the dust. Oh, here we go, 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 let us heal and grow. You won't be alone, we're unstoppable. Don't be afraid to show what we're going for. This is what we know. Here we come back to life, we're still breathing. Standing up, everybody's gonna see it. Oh, all you need to know is that we're holding on.
Hello, everyone. I am Jen Musser. I'm here with Kara Hayes and Mike Vini. We are the Difficult Emotions group, and today we want to talk to you guys about triggers. Triggers tend to provoke difficult emotions, which is what we're all about. And so I just kind of want to start us off with a quote that I read by Carl Jung. It's a Jung. And it's, "We cannot change anything unless we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses." And I really love that comment because or that quote rather, because it's a reminder that the longer that I continue to kind of play the victim role, the longer my trauma has the ability to oppress me. And so I think recognizing our triggers is really vital to this work. So if one of you would get us started and just kind of tell me what's one trigger that you have and what feelings did that evoke for you?
Well, I'd like to start, and with that, I want to explain what a trigger is for those of you that might know. I mean, we use that word and we think about oftentimes shooting a firearm, and that's how you get the firearm to work. You pull a trigger, and it's basically the catalyst for the explosion that comes out of the firearm. And when it comes to the emotions, it's pretty much the same thing. The trigger is something that basically sets us off into an intense explosion emotionally, whether that be anxiety, whether that be anger, sadness, or a combination. And triggers are just a part of life because we have different things that do that to us. And a lot of times, I spent many years going, I don't know why I feel this way. Like, I don't know. I don't know why I feel this way. And my therapist would ask me, I was just like, I don't know. I just feel whatever. And I've come to learn that there are certain things that trigger me into a downward spiral of emotions. And so one of the things, believe it or not, and it's like right here in this room, so this is so interesting that I'm talking about it, is my fish tank. There's something about fish that cause some kind of emotional response for me. Now, part of me thinks that there's some, I mean, we all had fish as kids and like little pets, like those carnival pets. And I think I had a few that died on me. And maybe like, I don't know, maybe I grieved and my parents just replaced it with another fish. So I never had time to, explore those emotions. But I just know that there's generally an emotional reaction to the fish tank. So I actually sometimes avoid looking at my fish during the day because I'm like, I don't want to I don't want to go there. So that's something that comes up for me. And yeah, I don't really share that one much. So that's one of my triggers that gets me emotional.
Thank you, Mike. I really appreciate you sharing that bit of your story. I guess I can share a little bit about a trigger for me. It's interesting that you say that it sparks an emotion in you. I feel like, it helps us recognize our own wounding, which is something I'm learning just recently about. Why does it hurt? Like, why does something really hurt? And I think the trigger that I have and just recently came up is when someone or a system or something challenges or questions my competency or my intention, which so I take that sort of very to heart. And I yeah, so what it brings up for me is just like, initially I have this experience of like, ouch, and it hurts, and and it takes a while for me to unravel the sort of, even though I know that's a trigger for me, it takes me a while to unravel what is the story behind it, what is the wounding behind that. And so, and I think it's because I put so much care into my work. It's like a lot of sort of focus and energy and real intention goes into it. So when that's questioned, I feel very triggered and hurt, and it takes me some time to work through it. And I just had a recent experience like that. So it's a good time to talk about it.
Wow.
Yeah, thank you guys both for sharing that. And it's funny that you bring that up because I think that happens with me a lot too. And I was actually going to give a different example, but I'm going to kind of piggyback off of what you said because that's such a huge deal to me. I think, and I like to go back to like my childhood, like why is this? Like, why do I kind of feel this way? And for me, a lot of it, I think, reverts back to that. When I was growing up, I think I was put in LD classes. I think my parents really thought that I was not smart. And that, whether they really believe that or not is irrelevant. That was a perception that I had. And so, and if same thing, Kara, anytime something challenges, somebody questions me or I feel like I've kind of done something wrong, and somebody could just be asking like, hey, did you did you remember to do this? And I could be defensive about it. So I'm very easily triggered by that, by people, kind of just challenging me thinking that they're challenging me in that way. So that's interesting. So yeah, I think that we have to be aware of those triggers in order to, control them. Because a lot of times people don't, they're not attacking my intelligence, but that's definitely an internal thing. And I think that's important for us to recognize that,
I love that. And, something that's coming up for me right now, like this is fresh within the hour, is triggers versus toxic.
Mm-hmm.
And like, are they one and the same sometimes? Because I was listening to this podcast this morning in the gym, by the way, back at the gym, super happy about that. And I work out with the heavyweights and listen to my podcast on, emotions and stuff. And one of the things that the host was talking about was that whenever you let the wrong person in your head, or someone who takes away your confidence within yourself, even if it's just for a few seconds, that's automatically a toxic person. And that was like, whoa, that like hit me really big because I thought about some situations in life where I have some people that I think are basically triggers because they do that to me, that within 30 seconds of talking to them, I'm like, I'm in a bad place for the next day, And so I think, it's not just, it can be things that happen in life. Maybe an earthquake might be a trigger for somebody, but it could also be people. And sometimes when you let triggers in constantly and you don't even realize you're doing it, you end up in therapy.
That's so true. Yeah.
I like that. I think it's making me think of this recent experience that I had, and sort of it does feel like there was some toxicity to it, but also after many days and talking to many friends to just sort of unravel what was going on. And the interesting piece is that it was like, what is going on for me? Is like, what is my part of the story that they triggered? So their actions triggered in me. So it turns into like, I felt attacked, but really, what is the piece? Like, where's the opportunity in that for me to learn more about myself, which is, I think, triggers can be considered. And I think, like stepping away from toxic situations, of course, is really important. But in some instances, I think it's easy to turn it into like, what is the message in it for me? What can I learn more about myself in this moment? And in considering the question of my competency and my intention behind my work, it really brought up like, I really identify as someone who has good intentions and wants to, as a healthcare provider and as someone who's interested in healing modalities and working in that fashion, is sort of like I identify as someone who brings good intentions to others. So it's a lot of like getting to know myself through the trigger. Like, how do I identify what's the story behind that and why, so I find that really, I'm trying to really see it as an opportunity to get to know myself better, and then to integrate. And I'm curious if that trigger, would that ever really go away? Is that something that goes away for me? It's not, I'm still working on that piece of it. Like, is that something that might just remain? Like, maybe I'll always sort of just be familiar with this wounding, but not necessarily completely alchemize it, just sort of integrate it. I don't know. I guess I'm curious still.
I have a thought on this based on John Terrell, the person that we all have in common here that got us started in this work together here. John said something to me on a retreat. Maybe he said it to you that, we're all about stories. We all got a story in our heads, or many different stories, right? But what gets us in trouble, and what emotionally, I should say, is that, the story kind of rules our life anyways. And he said basically you got to get yourself to a point where the story is still there, but it doesn't rule you the same way that it used to. And so I think going with what you said, Kara, I think you can get to a point where the trigger might still get you a little bit, but it won't take over the way it used to. That's what I'm hoping for, at least.
I think, Mike, that is so helpful to hear. It really sort of sums up I think that really helps with this idea that we're somehow damaged, we're flawed, like the wounding, this is a whole picture here of yeah, that's there. Yes, I can learn more about myself from it. Maybe it won't always go away. Maybe it's part of my identity and who I am, but maybe I'll be able to work with that. Maybe I can learn from it. Maybe I can work with it and integrate it in a way that's useful for others. So thank you for that. I think that's helpful.
Such deep stuff as we're recording this in the morning, by the way. And something else that just came to mind too, and I want every one of you who's listening out there, or watching this, I should say. I'm used to doing so many podcasts. I just think people are listening, not watching. But the thing is, there can also be good triggers too. That lead to intensely good emotions. I know, for example, this morning, I know Jen, you texted us, and I smiled. It's like, oh, I see the two of you pop up on my phone, and it's just like, oh, yay, happy, safe place. Certain other people text me, I'm not going to name names, and it's like, oh, geez, I'm not even going to look at this. So the thing is, I think when we talk about this idea of triggers, again, going back to the whole beginning with you pull the thing and there's an explosion of something, it could also be an explosion of good emotions. And I know there's even one for me. Oh, I'm so ashamed to admit this, but I'll tell the truth. Mr. Softy, the ice cream truck. And let me say for the record, I do have Mr. Softy's cell phone number, the one around here, but that's a whole nother thing. But the thing is, I hear the Mr. Softy truck, and it's seriously, it's like something takes over. I'm looking for money in my pocket, I've got cash, and I have to last night, we're out, just getting out of the car. I heard the truck, and I'm like, we got to get out of here. We got to get into the apartment, get away from the truck. But there's an example of something that's maybe not going to make me spiral into a place of anxiety or anger or sadness, but excitement. And so I had to be aware.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mike. Yeah, it doesn't all have to lead to, the more difficult emotions, But, and also just real quick, going back to what you said, Kara, about, just I keep losing my train of thought, you guys.
That's okay.
That's okay.
Oh my God, it keeps going away. I lost it.
I started writing notes today because I prepared to.
I keep thinking of something I want to say, and then it just goes away. Because I don't want to interrupt either, so I'm struggling with that. But
yeah,
out, but
that's all good. But no, I think there is some great wisdom here that you're all bringing up here, and Kara, I want to go back to actually your part, because your trigger about someone questioning your integrity or your character in a way, that's a pretty deep one for a lot of people, just really bringing on that self-doubt. And that's a tough one that a lot of us have experienced in personal relationships and romantic relationships in the workplace. And that one can really wreak havoc on you. So one thing I'm going to encourage everyone who's watching this to think about things that might trigger you or people, and actually write them down. There's nothing wrong with writing it down. I had a spreadsheet of my triggers years ago, because I needed to get real with certain things that bothered me, certain things in conversation. At first, I thought it was really silly, because I'm like, okay, you're seriously going to put this on a spreadsheet? Yeah, I did. But the cool thing was it gave me some clarity around, different things that were going on in my life. And just the simple awareness of it, this is the best part of it. The simple awareness of it can be all you need to really start on the path to healing. It's just when we're not aware of things that might trigger us and we go back to, well, I don't know why I feel this way. So, for those of you out there, I encourage you to let us know what one of your triggers is. Give us your main trigger. You can leave a comment below. Let us know, and one of us will definitely respond at the very least to you. And yeah, I want to hear. I'm curious to see if people have triggers similar to us.
Love that, Mike. I wrote that down, sort of this sort of spreadsheet of triggers, which I'm noticing more and more. It's a sort of process of getting to know yourself. Like how, in a way, it's kind of, it can be fun. It's like, who am I? How did I develop into this person? And how is this like a gift actually? How can I utilize this to bring forth my gifts and share that with others? And so, and you said the simple awareness is a path to healing. And I love that. So thank you for sharing that.
Oh, I said that? Wow.
You said that.
Thank you, iced coffee. Thank you, iced coffee. well, it really is, and it's a lesson in learning about yourself. Just another quick one that came up recently. I was listening to. I grew up in the '80s, so I was listening to on Spotify. You're all gonna want to like totally do this when we're done here. Is TV show theme songs from the '80s, like from all the cartoons, like Scooby Doo and all this. And so, I'm listening in the car, just driving, and oh my God, the amount of emotions that I went through. Thinking of just going back to childhood, not even being clear with what it was, but just how Scooby-Doo and Different Strokes and all these shows just like gave me all these different feelings, and so I think that was a powerful lesson in just triggers right there, that it can be any little thing and it's nothing to ever be ashamed of what the trigger is. So if there's something that's triggering you that you feel ashamed of, I think it's important to understand that there is no shame in it.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, that's a really big part of the process that we can get really stuck on. And it's a really hard place to sit with. Like shame can be very, very hard to sit with and uncomfortable. And kind of, yeah, I think there's something, Jen, you brought up early on. I think it was you who brought up like victimization, right? So you're not wanting to live in the victim mode. And sort of our wounding happened, and then some people can get really stuck feeling victimized and then not move forward. And that's the story they live in again and again and again. And they see it sort of recreated in their life again, again, again. I've been victimized. So I think this piece of the work can be really helpful in looking at like why do I feel stuck? Why do I feel so hurt again, again, again? Well, number one, like time to check in and look inward and see, why is that wounding? Why is it there? Who are you? Why is it there? And just know that it's something you can work with, something you can move through. You can find, you can step out of that path. So.
Yeah, I think, Kara, you were asking about, do you think that you can change the triggers? And I actually do. I think you can decondition the emotional triggers. I think that if we're just simply able to kind of sit with it, and because I think some people get so, especially because some people are heavily triggered. I mean, they go into panic attacks and things that can get really severe, right? But I think if we're just able to kind of just sit in it, if it's that bad, just sit in it. And then after that, maybe recognize the feeling and then talk about it. I think that we can start to decondition those emotional triggers. I think a lot of times in the situation, it's easier to judge, right? Like if somebody's coming at you and they're triggering that response, it's easier to judge them, to judge, kind of what's happening than it is to think about it. Than it is to like, just feel it and think about it. And I think that happens a lot. I had a situation at work where my intelligence was I felt that it was being challenged. I had a difference of opinion with other coworkers. A couple of them disagreed with me, and I really had to come to terms with, it's not this that's bothering me. It's the fact that they're challenging, or felt that they were challenging my intelligence, which they weren't. They just had a different opinion, right? So I think it's really important to recognize that, because the old me may have looked for another job. I don't want to be around this. I don't want to feel that way. But because I was able to realize, hey, that's not about what it's about, right? It's about me and my, that me feeling that they're challenging my intelligence. What we were actually disagreeing about wasn't, on the big scheme of things, wasn't that big of a deal, right? So I think that's important to recognize triggers in all settings.
I love this. And, I think, Jen, what you just said is like gold right there. That is gold. And when we're triggered by something and we spiral emotionally, we can easily start to blame the trigger. It's this person's fault. That's why I'm like this. We've all done it. It's a human thing to do. But the real growth, and maybe this goes with just changing it, is owning it. Saying, no, this was my response to their thing. That's called being proactive versus reactive, they say. That's what I've heard. And so I think that's a really cool thing. And, and Kara, it's like, you brought up something too, something that keeps happening, right? A lot of us have triggers that keep reappearing in different ways for some oddball reason. But back to I don't remember the quote exactly you gave from Carl Jung, Jen, at the beginning, but like just being able to like own it and accept it and put a name to it is like so much of the battle. So this is a lot of good stuff here.
Yeah. That's the liberating part, I think.
Yeah. Can I ask you both a question? I'm just curious, just putting you both on the spot here. Have you ever had a trigger that you can think of that used to trigger you maybe years ago and send you into a spiral, but right now, you don't even think about it?
That's a really good question. I have to think of
I can put you on.
Yeah, that is a good question. I'm wondering if you have an example, Mike. Do you have one that you've noticed has changed?
Oh, absolutely. Oh my gosh. I used to be triggered by situations with women at work. Oh, we're about to get real now. So, let me just get myself comfortable here for this. I used to have some real power issues where I would assess every interaction with a woman in my head, like who's got the power here, and my macho would come out, and of course my loving therapist, who's a woman, helped lovingly point this out and help me work through it. And I realized that women were actually a trigger for me on some level to get this egotistical story happening in my head of probably something with mommy from way back when. And at first I owned it. I said, okay, this is me, this is not them. But as I became aware of it, it seemed to just dissipate. And nowadays, there was an incident that happened with my team. If they watch this, last summer, I had my content director and my publicist. We were eating dinner, and they're both women, and they were talking about my business. I hired them. They're talking about my business and strategy, and I swear to you, I got lost in the conversation. I got lost with what they were talking about. It was over my head. These two are smarter than me. They know more about me than my own business, and I was grateful for it. And that's when I knew that trigger wasn't there anymore. And it's like, I was just grateful that they are so smart and they get to work with me. So Stephanie and Amira, if you watch this, thank you very much for that. And so I think that's something that's changed for me that I had to really become aware of.
Oh, that's beautiful, Mike. I love that.
Yeah, that's not a little thing. That's a really big thing. That's a really big thing, and I think that's so important for people, like viewers, to hear that, because I'm sure a lot of people struggle with that kind of power dynamic. And yeah, good for you. Congrats, and thanks for sharing that. I think for me, I'm having a moment of trying to consider what's really shifted, but I think I recognized that I had a lot of fear and didn't know I had a lot of fear. And then, through some retreat work, I was able to identify, I experienced fear in power dynamics. Maybe, I felt like easily like I could be taken over or sort of taken down easily when I was younger. So I think I avoided a lot of things because of that. And then having done some retreat work, I was able to identify how much fear was living sort of within me and how much space that created between myself and really having access to other people. I had no, unconsciously it was really there. And so having done the work of facing fear. I feel like now I'm in situations all the time that could be considered really intense or working with really challenging personalities or things like that. And so now I feel like just so much more present and less afraid of things, which, I can be in the face of something and not even really think about it. Before, I would avoid it. So I think just sort of the awareness of that really helped. Yeah, just sort of, it was a pretty quick, like, oh, wow, that's there. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a big one for you too.
Yeah. It was big.
And I think just for me, being around people who have a lot of big emotions used to really take over me. I feel like I'm pretty absorbent of energies around me, and so when somebody's really sad, I tend to get really sad. Like it's really hard to avoid that. So for me, I think that I have really, and I've said this to you guys before, so you probably already know this, but just really being able to accept what's mine and what somebody else's. Because, when somebody, for example, like I said, was upset, it would trigger me to, get upset. So now that I know, like, hey, this isn't mine, I don't know, I feel like I can tolerate that easier. Do you know what I mean?
That's big. That's really, really big. And
Yeah,
that's
it was big for me.
yeah,
Because
for those of you watching that are empaths, if you consider yourself an empath or a highly sensitive person, what Jen just said is really important. And it's interesting. We all talked about these things. Kara, you had asked before, can you ever change, a trigger that's causing you problems? Well, guess what? We just proved it. We all have. We've done it. So, ladies and gentlemen watching, it is totally, totally possible. And with that, we're going to wrap up here. And I want to thank you, too, for hanging out with me this morning as we record this on the YouTube. And I mean, on the Zoom to go on the YouTube. And thing I wanted to remind everyone watching, these triggers that we're talking about here are emotional triggers and things that just stir up emotion, a catalyst for emotion. And it's really important to have an awareness of them. That's it. And when you put a name to it, when you're honest about it, that's half the battle right there, But when you're blaming the trigger or just ignoring the idea that there could even be a trigger, well, again, you're going to end up with some real mental health challenges. If you have mental health challenges, they're going to get a lot worse. So I think that's really, really important. And please remember, if you haven't done so, please leave a comment below and let us know your biggest trigger. We would love to hear. And you don't have to put people's specific names. You can give someone a nickname or put a certain person in quotes. And that's totally fine. So thank you all for being here. And we'll be back soon with more talk around difficult emotions.